Mic check. You ready?
Check, check. Mic check. Check, check. Mic check. This about to be my freestyle rap check. Wait, is this recording?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, snap.
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal? Yo, what's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
Hey, what's the deal?
What's good, everybody? I'm Steve Discourse.
What's up, y'all? It's Jay Callie.
Back for another episode of What's the Deal. We got a lot of stories. This week has been so hot with just headline busting stories.
Has been a good week.
Where do you want to start?
First of all, I'm just going to start by saying that I'm mad. And for once, I'm not mad at the world. I'm actually mad at myself, Steve, because I kept saying, I'm playing the Mega Millions. I'm playing the Mega Millions. I felt so lucky. I felt it in my bones. I didn't play it, of course. I'm still broke. Somebody else is rich, however, and it's a smart person. You want me to tell you why they're smart? Because I don't know who it is. Whoever won the Mega Millions has concealed their identity, will not reveal it to the world. Their mama will not be getting a lump sum out of them. Nobody will, because they're not playing these games with us.
That's probably smart.
It's a person in South Carolina who, all this week everybody was running around
One
playing
person.
numbers like crazy. And one person.
See, that's selfish.
He won. The grand shebang. And everybody in the world is jealous, including myself.
Yeah, I don't
But
have...
also, you want to know what's interesting? There's been a few other people who won lotteries this week. For example, there was a lady. This is the inspirational story of the week for me. A woman named Kelly Brooks. She's smart, too. She revealed her identity, but she's still a smart woman because she won the lottery. She won $1 million playing out of Virginia. She almost forgot like I did. But you know what she has? A loving and supporting husband who said, babe, don't forget to go and play the lotto tonight. That's the support we all need in our lives. Someone who's down to get us rich. So he texted her. She played the numbers, and he texted her like, oh, my God, you won. And she was like, no, I didn't. And then she saw it on the news. She was like, oh, my God, I won. And I was like, whoa.
How far? We're in D.C. How far? Where does she live?
It was only $1 million, so I doubt that she's out here giving money away. But
Listen,
it just said Virginia. I don't
I'd like to
remember
try.
which county she's in. She's married. If you need a sugar mama, people get money and do crazy things.
Right.
Speaking of people getting money and doing crazy things, if you didn't win the lottery this week, don't feel bad, because 70% of people who win the lottery, billions, millions, and trillions of dollars, go bankrupt within 3 to 5 years of winning.
In 3 years?
Within 3 years, most 70%. That's most people who win the lottery will be broke. They will be bankrupt, and the biggest reason why is because people come up to them with their hand out, and it's really apparently hard to say no. Like, the biggest reason why is because they give all their money away. But also things like depression and suicide happen because people think, oh, I won the lottery. I'm superhuman. I can do anything. Life is going to be great. But money doesn't make them happy, and it doesn't make them healthy, and it doesn't make life better. And it's a reality check. Like, why is actually life so much worse? I'm stressed out. I'm emotional. Everybody hates me because I won't give them money. And they get really sad. People turn to drugs and alcohol. Lots of people die from overdose after winning the lottery. Like, it's insane. If you don't get a financial advisor, I don't know. Listen, keep playing your numbers. I'm going to continue to play mine. However, I'm going to be smart now that I know what happens to people after they win. But just know if you didn't win this week, maybe you're lucky because you get to still be alive and broke.
Missed a bullet.
I'd rather be alive and broke.
Dodged a bullet. All right. That makes me feel better about it, because I was like, because when I heard that news, I was like, she don't deserve that. He don't deserve that.
I still want to win.
Yeah, I still want to win. I didn't buy a ticket either, though, because I procrastinated, so could have been us.
I knew that was my money. So whoever that is in South Carolina, that's my money you're spending. I felt those numbers in my spirit.
I've been in South Carolina. Could have been my money.
I could have won it in D.C.
Yeah.
My point is, because I didn't play, I passed the opportunity to the next person. I know if I would have played it, I would have won. Anyway,
So
I'm gonna
there you
stop
go.
ranting. I get to be broke and happy. So, good luck in 5 years, Mister.
We're all rooting for you, mystery person.
Smart gentleman.
So, if you haven't heard already this week, one of the major stories that's been busting down headlines all over newspapers, TV, radio, is this pipe bombing incident, right?
Lord, yes.
That's an abrupt change of direction, but that's what we have to do on the news when we follow the news sometimes. We go from Mega Millions and we have fun to pipe bombs. So, so who is this guy? Cesar Sayoc.
Mm-hmm.
He's half Italian, half Filipino man, born in Brooklyn, raised in North Miami Beach. And I bring that up because there's some conversation here and there on little corners of the internet as to whether it's appropriate to label this guy as a white man or to acknowledge some of his mixed heritage possibly, or to not just call him white. Well, okay, but other people will insist he is. So there's the fact remains. So aside from that debate of really how you want to identify, his background, his ethnicity, and his race, whatever, he's a Republican for sure. Of course he is. He's registered. He voted in 2016. He sent these to either Democrat politicians and officials or left-leaning people, outspoken. A lot of journalists are reporting that these are people who Donald Trump has specifically called out by name in the past. And this guy has a long history of a criminal record. He pled guilty in 2002 to a felony charge of a bomb threat because he was, I guess, behind on his payments to Florida Power and Light. And he called and started threatening the operator, whoever picked up the phone. I mean, possession of a stolen car, possession of crack cocaine, theft from Walmart a couple different times.
That's a petty crime compared to what he's doing now.
Well, yeah, but he's got a long, super rocky history, evidently. And the van that he has allegedly been living out of for an unknown period of time, I haven't read any reporting on how long he's been living there, it looked like, if you've ever spent time in D.C. and you visit like the monuments and the National Mall, you'll every once in a while see like these vans or vehicles plastered in like crazy propaganda of all types of things, those. Right? Stickers or paint or sometimes like paper mache sculptures. Not quite.
Oh.
But this is what it's like. Like his van, mostly across areas where there were windows, had stickers or papers taped up of Trump. One of the photos I had, there was a piece that said CNN sucked. It was a whole collage of like super anti-left and pro-Trump kind of propaganda. And it was clearly a political thing. It was clearly partisan.
Clearly. I mean, he's sending it to political figures. No one's questioning if it's a political thing. It's actually really scary.
The real debate that people are having is who is at fault. Is Trump at fault? Is right wing or Republicans at fault for stoking stuff like this and inspiring this? Are left wing and Democrat type folks also guilty for fanning the fire to the other extreme?
Why is this even in question? This is an individual person who did something extreme. I don't think that we can blame an entity. Like, how can this funnel back to being the president's fault? Our whole entire society feeds into this type of political propaganda. Our entire society has been both a victim and a perpetrator of these types of ideas. Maybe not as extreme as him, but we can't be looking and see who to blame. Blame this person who clearly has no emotional management and a crazy criminal background. Seems to me like it's obvious who's at fault here.
Right.
The person running around putting bombs on political figures' doorsteps. And you know what's scarier is how does he even have access to plant these bombs in these places? And how did he go undiscovered for so long? There was over 14 bombs planted. Yeah,
well, I think some of that's going to come out as they keep doing the investigation. But I know the bombs themselves, in some cases, were pretty rudimentary built.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, they found him from a fingerprint on one of the envelopes. And through DNA evidence, which since he's a convicted felon, they had his DNA on file. So, not exactly a criminal mastermind.
What is even his MO? Like, you're putting bombs that may or may not even have the capacity to explode And what are you trying to kill people? Are you just trying to like singe their fingertips? What is it that he's trying to do and why? That's what I just am not clear on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's interesting. Yeah, that none of them went off.
Right.
Was that on purpose? We still don't know. There's a lot of things up in the air. The investigation
Like,
is still early.
Like he wants to be famous or something.
But man, yeah, it's pretty nuts. And I mean, I like the tack that you took. That who's at fault in that bigger picture, in the broader scope of the influence, isn't important. And there's a lot of the conversations that are happening on all levels of media are primarily kind of focusing on that conversation. And I probably would have been willing to wade into that, but you kind of preempted it, and I think that's a fair point. I mean, I think any politicians on any side need to not engage in that the way the media is. Now, if you go on the news, if you go on the radio and they ask you about this stuff, it's going to be inevitable. You can cut them off to some extent about it. But yeah, I think there could be a stronger response against this, but I think people are hedging their bets against the political fallout of it either way. And so, it's a mess.
It's fun to talk about, but at the end of the day, what really are we going to solve by figuring out who to blame? Oh, who can we blame? Doesn't matter. That's not the story. What matters is someone's attacking grand figures in our judicial system and in our government, leaders of this nation, and we're talking about whose fault it is. No, let's actually figure out how we should have better security and be keeping people safe.
Yeah, well, I mean,
whether you like them or not, they're important.
Well, and speaking of security, though, I mean, these were found in the chain of security in the process, right? So they didn't none of the recipients opened the mail up and said, "Holy shit, I didn't get blown up." These were all found, and even from George Soros, who apparently his security protocol is on point because he's a private citizen. Obviously, he's got security in a way that I don't, but
the way that I need.
Whatever he's got set up checking his mail, it worked because it didn't get to him either.
Good.
So yeah, that's wild. That'll keep unfolding. No doubt there'll be something extra to add to that on our next episode. So the next story I want to talk about is not actually a new story, so bear with us, listeners out there. You say, what didn't happen this week? Why are we talking about this? We're talking about it because you know how Facebook is. You see a thing posted, and you're like, what? Oh, my God. And then you realize after the fact, this is like 17 years old. This ain't new.
Okay, this story is not 17 years old.
But 17-year-olds are kind of involved in this because, see how I did that? Damn, good, right? So this school year, there's a school district in Colorado that made the decision to move to how many?
4-day week for students.
4-day school week. And for teachers, though.
Most of the weeks will be 4-day weeks for teachers, but some of those will be work days.
Yeah. So they cut out Mondays, and they really essentially did it because of lack of funding, resources. They one of the administrators was quoted saying, look, we can't be expected to keep doing more with less, and this is one way that we're going to hopefully save some money, get some cost reduction, and make this a more efficient process going forward, because we don't we're just struggling. And I bring it up, like I said, because I saw this just recently, and it reflects, I think, a problem we've been debating in politics kind of off and on for several years, maybe a decade, right, about where we spend our money, where we put our resources. Infrastructure all over the place is ailing. In New York right now, they're like, what do we do about the subway system that's decrepit? What do we do about Metro in D.C. that's decrepit? I mean, like 5 or 10 years ago, we had like a bridge in Minnesota collapsed, and then like some other heinous infrastructure collapsed. There was a few stories all kind of at once at that time as well. And this is kind of a widespread thing where we just apparently don't have enough resources for any critical infrastructure, right? Teachers all summer and spring this year in 6 states across the country did statewide, in many cases, protests because they were getting essentially screwed.
Not essentially.
No, yeah, they were getting screwed. So they were losing dollar for dollar amount of compensation because their rates for healthcare were going up, or they were not getting the pay raises that they need to at least keep up with inflation. And Jay Cowley is an educator.
I am.
So this is also germane to us. I swear I've never used the word germane like ever.
But he's used it
and
twice
now I
today,
keep using
people.
it.
Let me just tell
I hate
you,
the sound
twice
of it.
in 10 minutes.
I hate the sound of that word. It just drives me nuts sometimes. It's relevant though. We've got the experience in the table. So 4 days, because we don't have money, they're going to offer daycare for children who need it $30 a day. So that kind of helps parents. It's $30 a day though.
Yeah.
But I want to get your take as a teacher on what kind of strains and obligations and things rest on your shoulders. But they also said that they think this is going to help attract good teachers because it's sort of an incentive, right? Oh, it's a different schedule. Maybe it's less work days, right? But I applaud them for taking a risky move that's bold because something has to give, right? Something's got to give somewhere, and at some point, one piece of the system is going to break, and they said, okay, we can't do it anymore. We're taking a day away. Right. So I'm curious about your experience in schools and like what is your workload and responsibilities and obligations like, and how do you take news like this?
I have a lot of thoughts about this story, and honestly, I haven't really gotten them all very clear. But the first thought that I have is that I think it's ridiculous, and I think that it's a shame. Not that they're dropping down to a 4-day week, because I have been praying to the high heavens that the whole world gets a 4-day week because they're beautiful.
Yes.
However,
I would love it.
Feeling as though you have to move to a 4-day week because you have no resources to teach kids is a shame. Kids need things. We cannot continue to call ourselves one of the greatest nations on earth, air quote, and then we constantly take funding from schools, from education, out of teachers' pockets and essentially out of the minds and hearts of students every single day who need chairs, books, tables, desks, papers, and pencils, and we don't have it. So now it's like, oh, well, if kids just don't come on Monday, we can save all of the stuff we would have used on Monday and spread it out throughout 4 days. That's actually, it's not good. Even when you talk about attracting, strong teachers, we are in there, okay? You don't have to do tricks. You don't have to make teachers jump through hoops to attract strong teachers. Anybody that's still in the field of education today is there strictly for the passion, for the love of children and education, because it is not pretty. It's a struggle. It's a ton of work. People don't know how much work is going on behind the scenes. On top of the fact that I teach your kids, that I love your kids and communicate with them every day, all day. I practically raise them. I'm not tooting my own horn. That's what we do. Behind the scenes, it's also a really heavy workload. We have 2 and 3 jobs all in one. So while we are thankful for a 4-day week, that I don't believe is going to attract better teachers or higher quality teachers. The fact that you have any teachers at all is a blessing, because we're still in here putting on this footwork and changing this freaking country one child at a time.
So I mean, what would, because I know some of the conversations around District of Columbia public schools is they keep offering teachers more and more money, but the problems with the school system and maybe the workload is still not enough. Like, you can't, there's only so much you can put up with regardless of how much you're going to earn, because it's again, the process, the whole system is not really functioning well, and you can't pay that away. So what in your mind is
there's 2 things when you start talking about education. 1, you're talking about financial compensation for educators. And 2, you're talking about the work that teachers do in general. What does education actually look like today? D.C. is in a very special place, in my opinion, because teachers in Washington, D.C. actually do make a pretty decent amount of money. Now, granted, it costs a lot of money to live here, so in comparison to the economy, maybe we're not doing that much better than other educators. But teaching in general, people are making $25,000 and $30,000 a year in this field. That is not a livable wage to say you went to college, and you know what I'm saying? So in D.C., it's a special circumstance. I would never even bring it up in the conversation of teacher wages, because it's not skewed. It's a biased outlook on what teachers actually make. But on top of that, education today is very, very high stakes. Very high stakes testing. Kids who have no emotional management strategies. We see how people react to minor emotional situations, people living in dangerous situations, whether it's the community or the kids themselves. The amount of paperwork that has to be done, the amount of data input that has to be tracked and analyzed and sorted, and then you got to go back and reinvent the wheel. And then it's pressure coming from the principal, it's pressure coming from the charter boards to be the top performing school, to take a school from an F to an A in 3 years, or else you're getting shut down. That is what, like, every school that I've ever worked at, it's like, take this underserved, and I choose to work with underserved communities, but take this underserved community, this school that's performing poorly, we're going to give you 3 years to turn it around and make this like this optimum place with all these kids reading on these high levels and achieving. And if you don't do it, we're coming for your charter, or we're coming to shut you down.
So that to me makes it sound like the problem is the school or the teachers or the administrators in the
Problem
school.
is the entire system.
So are kids failing in schools because the teachers aren't doing right and the administrators aren't doing right, or are there outside factors other than just what happens inside the school?
Kids are failing in schools because people refuse to acknowledge that education happens inside and outside of those four walls, and everybody outside of those walls has to do their part in making sure that the education continues when the bell rings. And I don't think that always happens. So then you come inside the school, and you have lots of people busting their butts. When I tell you, we're doing work. Like, I'm teaching down in that classroom, and everybody inside my school building is teaching down. And you see in a few kids, they just soar. But then there's always those few kids that just don't. And we're always going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out how to get through to them. You know what I mean? There's learning disabilities, and then there's people who are too traumatized, or if you don't have your basic human needs met, then education just isn't going to be a priority to you or your family. So it's lots of things that play into it that I think people like to say your teacher isn't doing a good job. But it's more than just that.
Right. And yeah, I think that's part of the burden where that was sort of alluding to, where you can only pay so much away.
Yeah.
If you're expecting a teacher to do something that is reasonably not within their scope of ability to affect, if there are problems at home, it's you can't pay them enough money to take responsibility for something that they really can't impact. So that is a story. I know we're a long way from summer vacation, but that's a story that we'll have to come back to and see when they start really putting out public statements or research to see how they think it went.
Yes, I would love to see this school's particular data at the end of the school year.
Right, because this is, again, I just think there's a lot of issues in different fields that are the same as this, whereas there's just not the resources we need for it, and everybody's doing more with less. And something's got to give. And so that's why I wanted to highlight this, because they said, all right, we're going to give. We're not doing as much. We're not offering as much service as we used to.
My final takeaway is this. If you're looking for Jay Callie, you can find her in Colorado, working 4 days a week, okay? I'm moving. I'm going to be there. It's warm all the time. They've got open plains, fields, free for a girl like me. Catch me on the west side.
She's going to be out there wrangling horses and out on the ranch.
Because I'm going to have 3 whole extra days over the weekend to do it. I'm going to have time. I'm going to be in Colorado living my best life. Don't look for me. I won the lottery. I'm going to Colorado. I'm buying an open field and a ranch in Buffalo, and I'm teaching kids 4 days a week.
All right.
And our test scores are going to soar, baby.
So moving right along, you've heard about this migrant caravan from Honduras?
I've heard about it. I don't like the term, but I've heard.
Oh, because it sounds like a minivan or what?
These are people, and it sounds like cattle to me.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, most of you have probably heard something about this to different degrees. There's a group, maybe a couple thousand migrants coming from Honduras, which is down very southern end of Central America.
Yes.
They got to the southern Mexico border a couple days ago. It's still a couple thousand miles, I think, to get all the way to U.S. border. They're coming up here. A lot of the Trump administration have been coming out saying, alleging like there's Middle Eastern, like immigrant subversive ones that we need to be worried about hidden in there, using it for cover. They've said they're coming up here because it's completely open borders and it's lawlessness in the U.S., which allows them. And there's a lot of people who, if you're liberal or not, still can be a little bit cagey and a little wary about the whole immigrant situation and debate on what should immigration policy be. So I wanted to bring up, just for context, I think it's important that, when people say, go back to your country, stay in your country, why are you coming here? Why are they criminals? Are these bad people? By and large, these people are looking for asylum, if you ask them, right? And not if you listen to us in America telling you what they want, but if you just talk to these people, if the reporters are down there, this is what they're looking for: asylum from political upheaval, economic upheaval in their countries. And okay, sure, maybe you don't believe that. You're still skeptical for whatever reason, or that may be what it is, but stay there. I'm just going to do a quick history of U.S.-Honduras relationships.
Go for
because we've been deep into the inner workings of their country for a century. And so when you talk about why are you coming here, stay in your own country, the United States foreign policy has a lot of influence in good and bad in a lot of these small countries down there, because we have the power economically or militarily or whatever to influence them in ways we want. And this goes back to early 19th century. And have you ever heard the term Banana Republic?
Yes, I've heard the
Do
term.
you know the store?
Yes.
Banana Republic is essentially when U.S. companies and kind of Western economic interests would go down into these Caribbean and tropical areas and essentially buy up property, turn these things into monocropping economies, essentially, or like a Banana Republic means they were kind of forced into just producing bananas nationwide to export for these companies for sale across the world or in particular areas. That's what a Banana Republic is. They didn't choose that. They weren't down there in Honduras man, there's a lot going on the other side of the world. I bet if we all just get together with bananas, we can hit the cash cow, right? That's not what happens. Outside forces, we come in. Companies like Del Monte and other massively large food companies bought millions of acres of property in countries like this and forcibly turned their economy into something that it wasn't. And now, and as a result, you have people who live and have historical roots there who don't have access now to buying property. They don't have access to saying what they want to do with their land, with their time, with their labor, and they kind of get forced on this pathway.
Right.
So that's a long time historical. I mean, since then, in the 80s with Ronald Reagan, there were people in the Reagan administration who referred to the country as the USS Honduras, as if it's like one of our Navy ships or something like that. This is how embedded we were, and we've done joint construction of military bases and operations. We've had a military presence down there. We've supported one, presidential candidate or one administration over others. We've been more or less active in that. We've had our people down there guiding the conversation around economic policy and things like that. Honduras doesn't exist out there independent of the United States. It just doesn't, for better or for mostly worse. So when you hear about these migrant caravans, however you feel about immigration is an issue, you got to understand this is where they're coming from. To you, Honduras has nothing to do with you. But to them, the United States has a heavy hand in how their country is played out. And this is a tiny country relative to even a lot of American states.
Really small.
Right? And I just want I'll leave it right there. I mean, you know what? And that was a long time ago. So you say, all right, what about the migrants now? Well, there was a lot of questionable activity in the Honduran presidential election last year where the U.S.-backed candidate was trailing in polls big time. And then at the end of the election, there was this information blackout for a couple of days. And nobody, quote unquote, knew where the ballots were. And miraculously, after this blackout, on top is the U.S. backed.
Of course. The
guy,
United
right?
States has their hands in everybody's business.
And so how much, people in America, we just had, we're going to have a conversation with Qiana Johnson later in the episode about how people don't vote, people don't engage politically in the United States because they don't trust the system will work for them. Imagine you're in Honduras and this is the kind of things you hear. So, and then there was a military coup in 2009 and the U.S. purposely didn't come out and acknowledge it as a coup because it had too many implications politically and legally speaking for U.S. policy. So they just let it happen. And since then, there's been so much turnover and upheaval in the political leadership. This is what Hondurans are doing and going through. And this is why we've had so many Honduran immigrants coming in the last couple decades. This is the situation. So if you feel uncomfortable about immigration and all these people coming to the United States, okay, but just you got to know the context and the history of it. Rant over.
Was that a rant?
I don't know. Was it? It felt like it.
It felt informed.
Okay, that's good.
Rants tend to be rambly. That was good.
So I'm not going to tell you how to feel about immigration policy and stuff, but you just gotta. We
Know
just
the
gotta
facts.
understand what's going on here, right?
Actually,
So they're on their way with their tiki torches, and they're going to burn America down.
Well, I can't wait till they get here because I'm trying to jump on the back of the line because wherever they end up is where all the free American resources that we just give away to immigrants will go. And if I can get a little bit of free immigrant resources,
Oh yeah,
where they at now?
we
Can
just
where
we
can I
just
meet 'em?
dump trucks full of resources we send down to them, which is why the schools in Colorado don't have any money because we just give it all away to. I'm being facetious.
America.
So all right, moving right along. What was the next story on our list?
We need to talk about this voting. We're coming up
Right.
on, we're in the pre-voting stage right now in the United States of America, which means, of course, there's going to be some scandal happening. Right now, there's a lot going on down in Texas, and there's a lot going on in Georgia. I'll start with Texas. There's a woman named Crystal Mason who is now facing literally 5 years in prison for voting. You
Say
may wonder,
what?
how can someone be going to jail for voting? It's their civic right. Oh, my God. So Crystal Mason is a woman who was once a felon, and she was released from jail. She didn't know that she wasn't allowed to vote. Don't ask me why she didn't know this. She didn't know. Her mom was like, girl, it's voting time. It was around the presidential election. You need to go and vote. Put your ballot in, do your civic duty, choose the president, blah, blah, blah. So she went, she registered to vote. She did all the bells and whistles. So when she goes down to actually cast her vote, her name wasn't there. So she was like, oh, that's weird. I wonder why. So instead of casting a regular vote, she did a provisional. And it didn't get counted, but she did not read on there where it said anybody who has been a felon is not eligible to vote in the United States of America. So she still did the provisional vote, dropped it in, went on about her day. Next thing she knows, she's getting hit with a lawsuit. She's in and out of the news circuits. Everybody's like, it's a big shablam. Like, girl, you're going to jail. I cannot believe you just voted, knowing that you're a felon. And they made such a big deal about it. And, of course, she challenged it. But the reason why this is relevant today is because she just got locked up.
Yeah, she just started.
She's been fighting it for the past 2 years, but she recently did get arrested. She's going to serve 10 months, and when it's up, she's going to, continue to face the rest of her charges and possibly do all 5 of those years simply because she didn't read the fine print on her ballot and she voted. She said it was mistakenly because she didn't know she wasn't allowed to, and I mean, she's in jail for that, and I think that's insane. Nobody reads stuff.
Fine print.
Now, I will say this. I do think that it's a little questionable why she didn't know that felons couldn't vote. It seems like common knowledge, but if she didn't know and she did vote, I don't think a 5-year sentence is a justifiable punishment for voting when you shouldn't.
I think you got to slap a fine on her.
A fine?
I don't know, probation. I don't know what.
But
yeah,
5 years in jail because I vote, and the vote wasn't even counted. Like they caught it, and of course they're going to catch it because they count the votes. So it's like you really put this woman in jail.
She wasn't the tie-breaking vote,
right?
And had repercussions. They caught it ahead of time.
It was
system
it was
worked.
A provisional ballot. Like I just don't understand why she would ever be in jail for in prison for 5 years for voting mistakenly. Like what if a child voted and they weren't 18? Are you going to say the fine print says if you're not 18 you can't vote?
Try them as an adult.
You're going to jail for 5 years? Like come on. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
So on top of that, the Gwinnett County, Georgia, is facing a very big lawsuit for voter discrimination because they've been throwing out absentee ballots for the silliest reasons. And, of course, surprise, surprise, it turns out to be very racist. Down in Gwinnett County, Georgia, people have been coming down to do their absentee ballots as a standard ballot, It's very standard. But they've been taking ballots and tossing them for things like, oh, the signature on the ballot doesn't match the signature on your registration card. Oh, you recently moved and you didn't update your address yet. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, just silly little stuff. So they've thrown out about 600 ballots without informing these people that their votes weren't going to be counted. And of those 600 ballots that were thrown out, over 300 of them belong to African American people and other voters of color. And the lawsuit is that they weren't given due process. They were not notified that their ballots weren't going to be counted. And what they suggest is give us at least a 24-hour notice to correct it. Let me re-sign the damn card if it's that serious. Like, let me update my address and come in and vote. You don't get to just throw my vote in the trash and say nothing of the, like, that's a lot of ballots. 600 is 1/3 of the absentee ballots that have been received in Gwinnett County, Georgia.
Yeah, that's big.
In the garbage, 1/3. All mostly black people. That's going to skew the election. I just don't understand why an entire county would think they could get away with something so crazy.
We've talked about some similar stories in Georgia on the last episode, and just a couple days ago, Palm Beach, a newspaper in Palm Beach County in Florida, released research that they did where Governor Rick Scott, when in Florida as a felon, you can vote if the governor signs off on like an exception. So, and it's not like you got to personally get the invitation to him, but they've shown that there is a definite slant, racially speaking, in favor of whites and then blacks. 2/3 more likely if you're a white man than a black man, and also a favor towards Republicans over Democrats. In the felons, he grants permission. So Rick Scott, and I'm just going to take off my neutral hat here and say Rick Scott is totally. I don't want to have to bleep it out later just because that's an extra step for me. But the guy is a mess, and he's running for Senate right now in Florida. So if you live in Florida, you got to know that. So yeah, these are a lot of common tactics.
I can talk about this and I can get excited about it, but at the end of the day, y'all, racism and sexism is no longer shocking or surprising. It's actually expected. I tell y'all this stuff because you deserve to know. But don't clutch your pearls. We all knew it was coming. It happens every year.
Yeah.
It happens every day.
We're going to talk towards the end of the show with Qiana Johnson, who's a founder of Life After Release, who will give you some inspiration as to, okay, with all this shady stuff going on, why should I be involved? Why should I vote? Why should I get? And secondly, I think I said this last episode, they're suppressing your vote because the vote actually works. They wouldn't go out of their way if it was really all like pre-written, right? So do it. So we got to wrap up and get into this interview. So last thing on our list, have you heard of a woman named Megyn Kelly?
I don't know her.
Good answer. Good answer. The rest of us do, for better or worse. She was, controversial Fox News anchor. She got fired from there and then was hired controversially from NBC. And a lot of people were like, bruh, she does not work for me.
Right.
Like, I watch your channel all the time. She doesn't work for me. People who work there were like, I work here. She's not for me. They went on, paid her $69 million a year, I think.
This is why schools don't have any money.
Or over her couple-year contract to be an anchor of 2 different shows. Neither of them are doing very good. They're struggling in ratings. But that's not what we're talking about. Or I'm not Nielsen. I don't care about the ratings.
So what's going on with Megyn Kelly, man?
She was on air on Tuesday. You've probably all heard about this. It's all over. She was on air on Tuesday in a conversation defending blackface as a Halloween costume and showing her whole ignorance or her whole secret plot to be racist on purpose, whatever side you fall on. And it's a lot of controversy. She's been fired now. That's terminated. So if you've heard that dropped on Friday. And
why would she say that?
She says it for one of two reasons. One, she knows what she's doing, and she's a racist, and she did it for controversy or whatever. And that's fine if you think that. I'm not really going to argue with you on that because I don't feel like it. Or she did it because she literally is that naive. It's hard to believe you can be that naive. And I was listening to NPR, and one of their commentators, Eric Deggans, made a great point that this woman knows expertly how tricky and subtle and nuanced sexism can exist, right? in our society, how subtle it happens, how invisible it is, but how pervasive and impactful sexism can be, misogyny can be in our workplace, in our social lives, everywhere. But yet, almost the exact same mechanisms, that's the same way racism happens, is all these subtle ways that you don't pick up on. They're not overt. They're things you say but aren't like smoking gun, I'm a racist. They're like subtle tricks and codes. The same racism works in the same way. These system of oppressions all work in the same way. She can't apparently understand the complexity and nuance of racism and discrimination.
I don't buy it.
And I thought that was a great point. Somebody else, a friend I mentioned this to, said that's not really a great point. It's pretty obvious. And I said, okay, fine, it's obvious, but it's still a good point that it's a good way to hold her accountable to this. And maybe if she is naive and she wasn't aware of it and deliberately ignoring it, then that still speaks to the way.
That's two different things.
It speaks to the way racial discrimination still exists, especially when you consider the fact that many of our grandparents, many of our parents existed and lived and grew up and were born in a time when it was legal to literally brutalize people based on race. Morally and legally it was acceptable, right? So it's hard. And the way she says, when I grew up it was okay, but here's the thing, I'm going to check her on this. I don't know where she grew up, so hopefully my assumptions are right. I'm assuming the vast majority of the people around her in her immediate circles, at school, in her neighborhood, at the grocery store, wherever her mom took her or her dad took her on the weekends, was white. And if that's the situation you're in, then maybe blackface was okay there, but there were no voices. There were no voices to challenge you that you were going to pay attention to. So that's the only reason it was okay. However old Megyn Kelly is, however old I am, however old, a 17-year-old listening right now, a 50-year-old, 60, 70-year-old right now, it was never all right. You were just in spaces where no one was challenging you on it, right?
That's one. Can I
Sure.
chime in?
Yeah.
The other thing is, it's very different when you're talking about your grandparents and when you're talking about Megyn Kelly. My grandmother not being able to keep up with the times, or not knowing what is and isn't racist, or what is and isn't sexist, or what is and isn't homophobic. Okay, that's because my grandmother sits on the porch all day long and she doesn't know anything about what's going on in society anymore because she's old and she doesn't have to, right? So she can talk about, oh, when I grew up, it was like this, or y'all on y'all smartphones and blah, blah. She doesn't know. They're old people who are out of touch.
Okay.
Megyn Kelly, you are a news anchor, national news, millions of dollars paid. It is your job to keep up with society, to know keep up with the times, keep up with the laws, to know what's going on. So saying, oh, when I was growing up, it was okay. Is that not okay anymore? No, you don't actually get to pretend that you don't know the current climate, the current racial climate of this nation, that you don't know that blackface hasn't been okay for 50 years. No, that's an excuse. You are not my grandma. You are a $1 billion, $1 million news anchor who's, get out of here. You just want an excuse to be stupid and blatantly racist on national TV. You made a fool of yourself, and now you're out of a job, and I hope you never get hired again. Ever. We already didn't like you. So why would you do this? Dumb.
Cut. That's a wrap. I don't have anything to say to that. That I mean, that's it. That put a perfect bow on it.
Obama style drops the mic, rolls out.
Our mics are on little suspended arms, so we can't drop them in here.
Stop. Don't tell them.
I'm going to edit that. I'll edit that out. That was a mic. That was a mic sound.
Can we go?
Yeah, let's go. We're going to be right back with a quick conversation with Qiana Johnson. She's a founder of Life After Release. She does amazing advocacy, organizing work in criminal justice reform. And damn, she's got a lot of good stuff to say. So we'll be right back with that. All right, and so now joining us in studio, Qiana Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you for coming in. You are a community organizer activist. You like that word?
Community organizer, activist, and I'm also a founder of an organization as well.
Okay, so throw that out there. What's the organization?
The organization that I'm a founder of is called Life After Release, and this organization was founded actually while I was incarcerated. I sat in my cell and thought about business plans and thought about ways to engage people who were formerly incarcerated. And it came from me just trying to find resources for when I get back out. And there weren't any in Prince George's County. So I just started there. Life After Release was actually born inside of a jail cell.
Wow. That's it. That's just wow. It was born inside of a jail cell. That's amazing.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you like to start from that basis of your personal story, and it was how you got into this, right? So
Yes.
started in a jail cell. Walk us back from that point.
I'm going to walk you back all the way until 2013 when I was actually first charged with this offense. I was charged with theft over $100,000 involving real estate with a person who I thought was a very, very good friend of mine. She turned out to be my co-defendant and not so much of a good friend. But as we were going through the process of being questioned and being investigated for over the course of maybe like 18 months was the course of the investigation, and just having like cameras poked in your face because they made it a national like thing, right? It was on 2020. And what the detective told me, and I'll never forget what he said, you're a very smart black girl, black woman actually, but you're going to I'll make sure you spend a lot of time in prison.
Oh, no.
And I was just like, okay, well, so from that, I just started seeing all these injustices, and Life After Release immediately became something that I knew had to be born into this county.
I think it's very special that you were like inside of your own jail cell and you were thinking about what you could do to help other people.
Yes.
Like you weren't just thinking about yourself. You already had that forward thinking mindset, that community oriented goal, and that's something that you don't really run into in a lot of people.
So what was your background before you were incarcerated?
Before I was incarcerated, I did 10 and a half years for the federal government. So I worked for Department of Homeland Security. I worked for USDA. I worked for Department of Veteran Affairs. I worked for Export-Import Bank, and a total of about maybe 10 years of federal government service before my incarceration.
So, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, another person, somebody might call a patriot or something like that. Like you've done literal, straight up, legit, 100% public service for the federal government. And yeah, I think patriot is a word that some people would use, and at other people in other contexts, they definitely would. And yet you had this detective who, to your face at least, was outright that he was just bent on putting you away.
Right.
because
that's his job, or was it personal? Do you think, or what?
It was a point where it became personal for this detective. So one of the people who were involved actually worked for the police department. So they made it really personal for them. And so as the detective made it personal, he made the prosecutor make it personal, and then the prosecutor made the judge make it personal. And I saw all of this happen. Like, it went from the detective, and then the detective's behavior transferred to the prosecutor, and then the prosecutor over to the judge, like where there was total bias being held, and the judge was just blatantly just being very biased in the case against me.
What was it about you that made them take it so personal? Do you think it's because you're a woman, or were they offended by the fact that you were intelligent? Like, what do you think it was that rubbed them the wrong way?
Well, what rubbed them, I was a woman, and I was a black woman at that, playing in what would seem to be a white-collar offense in a white-collar type of environment.
Yes.
And they didn't. Whereas a white woman or a white male in my position probably would have got some type of probation,
right,
and some type of slap on the wrist and say, okay, yeah, don't ever do this again. They really wanted to make more of an example of me than anything else.
I know there's a lot of people who have different takes on that, right? There's some people out there who will know right on, and they know exactly what you're talking about, and there's other people who will probably say, I don't believe that, right? Like, I don't buy that. Either what the other people will get out of it, or your level of innocents are undeserving of the personal vendetta. But I mean, we've had some conversations about plenty of news stories on this podcast that will back up some of that and a lot of the imbalance in the criminal justice system. But we've also had conversations with people like you working to go forward from this bad experience. We had some guests on last month who work for the Credible Messenger Initiative, which takes formerly incarcerated folks and people involved in gang activity and things like that, trains them to be mentors and to intervene with the youth. And so let's pivot back to that, to the work you're doing now.
Right.
Where's the best place to start?
For me, the best place to start is at electoral power, building electoral power. In Prince George's County, people who are formerly incarcerated, once you hit free ground, whether you're on parole or probation, it does not matter. You're allowed to vote. So what that means for me and what that looks like for me is, and for people like me in my position, is first taking our voice that was snatched away from most people in our positions and taking that and making it a tool for us so that we can then work on not only getting the most progressive person in office first and foremost, and then after we get that most progressive person in office, start to change some of the laws that are totally affecting us. For example, just this past session in the General Assembly, there was Senate Bill 122 that was trying to get passed by Bobby Zirkin and a few others. They were trying to pass a law that said that if you were ever involved in any type of criminal activity and had any type of a criminal record, and you were caught in the vicinity of someone with a handgun, that you would get 20 years.
What? I've heard of that
Wow.
before.
Right?
Not
right?
20 years, but I've heard of that.
And this was supposed to be some type of Baltimore initiative that would stop the killings in Baltimore. And this is how they wanted us to believe, like, we're just trying to get the crime down in Baltimore. However, what that did is that was state legislation that was trying to be passed. So anybody in the whole state that was affected by that, especially in the climate where Baltimore cops were planting guns on people,
Right.
you know, that was just disturbing to me. So me as an activist and as an organizer, I spend a lot of time in Annapolis to try to change that. So building electoral power and getting people who are directly impacted to understand what that voice means to have that type of power is important. So I start there with my activism.
I think that it's insane whenever I hear about laws like that are being questioned or being passed, because if you're going to pass a law that has so much potential to be racist and to be used against, you know, communities of color or already marginalized communities, you have to be doing a lot of back work to make sure that it doesn't crumble or to make sure that it doesn't, you know, perpetuate directly into systems of oppression. And what people do is they just put those laws out there. They leave them to do whatever it is that they're going to do, and no one's regulating. So then things actually get so much worse. And I want to say before they get better, but they kind of never get better. They just get worse.
Well, I mean, I think that's why getting people to participate in this who aren't actual officials or in elected office is important, because I mean, like, take me, I'm white, male, I mean well. If I have power to pass and make these decisions, I can mean well all day, and I can mean it to the bottom of my heart, but if I don't understand situations, I can't build those safety nets in place without people checking me, right? And whether it's built in my process, on my staff, or people on the streets giving me a pain in the neck, calling me, showing up in my office all the time. And I know people listening too and say, no, they're not naive. They know what they're doing. Okay, fine. Well, if they know what they're doing and it's going to have these fallout effects, we still need to participate. So regardless of what the people making the decisions have in their heart, the participation from everybody that's liable to be affected, or at least just in the jurisdiction of impact. If you think you'll never be susceptible to any of these laws ever, it's still important for you to also weigh in as well. Because you said earlier before we were talking, Qiana, that change in criminal justice starts locally before it ripples out to state or federal or national, right?
Absolutely. And I think people need to understand that. The first thing they say is, you know, and it's so heartbreaking, especially having gone through this criminal justice system and seeing it firsthand, to talk to another person who's gone through the criminal justice system who just doesn't see that. And they're like, I'm not voting. It don't matter to me. They don't care about me. And it's I'm trying to explain to them that no, it really does matter. And it's kind of sad because a lot of people, and I saw this, and this is the reason why I want to be a voice, is because not a lot of people that go to prison can come home and articulate what their experience was. So I feel like it's my duty to do this because a lot of people that go to prison, they're suffering from mental illness, or they're suffering from some sort of drug abuse, or they've just, started at the wrong end of they just been going through poverty, or they've seen a lot. So you have someone like myself who is college educated, who has have worked in the corporate America, have worked for the federal government, and then to get caught up in this type of a situation and be able to come back out and and basically tell people, no, listen to me. And it's kind of sad because people will listen to me because I can speak properly and say, this is why you need to listen to me. So I capture their ear. But if someone is not speaking in full sentences and they're not, maybe articulating their message as they should be, then people are just going to kind of be like they're not important. I don't want to listen to them. So
do you feel like you stand as a voice for those people who are being unheard, and do you also help them to kind of develop their own voice so that they can speak out for themselves?
Absolutely. Yesterday we were out in the community of District 7 in Prince George's County. I like to break it down all the way down to a district because District 7 is the most underserved district in Prince George's County, and that district has like a 49% unemployment rate. Most of the people who return back from jail and prison return back to District 7. So it's filled with drugs, and it's filled with just poverty and different things, homelessness and things like that. So as we were going through District 7 yesterday, we met with an individual, a few individuals, and took them to go vote for the very first time. One gentleman was 37 years old, and when he got his folder in his hand, he just said, "Oh no, I can't do this. I can't do this." And what we realized was that he couldn't read. And I said, "Oh no, I didn't think about that part. Here it is, a 3-page ballot with all these freaking questions on it, and you're expected to go into this booth and understand this whole paragraph of an amendment of a this and a that, and you have somebody who is 37 years old who probably isn't over a reading level of a 5th grader,
right? If that."
And it just dawned. I said, "Wow!" But I walked him through it, and he voted yesterday, and it just to me is rewarding, and that's when I say that's the type of grassroots level that I'm talking about.
Yes.
That's the type of what type of changes I want to see happen.
You know what? It's interesting that you bring that up because I work, so closely with populations of people who struggle with reading. As an educator with students, but also with their parents. And I think that that's something that a lot of people overlook. When we can talk about, community organizing and doing the work and getting people in the ballots, but we forget that there are grown adult people who are illiterate. And it's not a small percent. It's a very large percent of people who are suffering with illiteracy. And we have to do more to do interventions with these populations on reading, with literacy, with government literacy, understanding how voting works, understanding how their community works. But before we can do any of that, we need to be able to read.
Yeah. That was so intimidated to that gentleman. He was shaking as he was holding his ballot.
It's intimidating to me, and I am college educated. I couldn't imagine going in there and being like, what am I about to do? These people want me to do this, and I want to do my civic duty, but what in the world is this?
Yeah, and not just the subject matter, but sometimes just the way they write it, which is purposely vague, maybe, sometimes in an effort to sound like it isn't persuading you one way or the other, but even just in the way they have to form the explanations can be tricky to follow for all of us. So that's big.
It's real.
So when I was there, I went on Monday to one of your organizing meetings, and that was pretty cool to see how many things you've kind of got going on your radar, and you have a small team, and people have their kind of assignments and efforts that they're looking into, following up on, working with. I know you're involved in some of the transition work for Angela also Brooks. Do you
Aisha Braveboy.
Yeah.
I get them confused too. One person in my mind.
Yeah. So correct me on that and explain what you're doing there.
So I'm going to start off and just by giving congratulations to Aisha Braveboy as an African American woman who has made it to this position of being our next state's attorney in Prince George's County. I think that is an awesome, awesome thing. And what we are doing as the
I'm sorry. First, explain real quick what the state's attorney is.
Absolutely, yes. Again, I'm taking for granted that people know. The state's attorney's position is basically the top cop, is what we like to call them. They are the people who, the state's attorney is basically over a bunch of, or a large amount of state prosecutors who actually prosecute criminal cases in Prince George's County. Just to give you a side note, most of the prosecutors are middle-aged white men. Right, so just wanted to put that out there. But we have Aisha Braveboy, who's going to be our next state's attorney, and she's basically the top cop. She holds a lot of power in that position. She can help with diversionary programs. She can help to train her line prosecutors that they are not to that they're to give people their full discoveries, that they are not to recommend sentencing that is just way out of control. She has a lot of power. So the reason why we are choosing to apply direct pressure to that office, and not only just pressure, but basically just to provide like a community liaison type of reference to let her know, hey, look, this is what's going on in the courts. Because sometimes those positions, people are way up here and they don't know what's going on down below.
Right.
So what we are doing is becoming a conduit between her and the community. So she has actually allowed for us to be the Mass Liberation Project team.
Oh, that's awesome.
To be a part of her transition team, and to be a part of her policy, to be a part of what's going on, and so that we know and that we can provide input. And I think she's awesome in being able to do that for us.
That's really awesome. Like, that's the type of work that, I don't know, I'm just shocked. I wasn't expecting you to say that. I'm really happy to hear that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And this, I just want to reiterate, it is building on a point that we make a lot throughout all these episodes and a lot of the conversations we have and stories we cover, that these things can happen, but we have to be involved, and we try and feature people like you who can show an actual concrete example of change that is possible, change that can happen. So in wrapping up, for people, like you just used the phrase mass liberation. I know for some people not familiar with the concerns and issues systemically that you're talking about, that might sound like kind of a crazy phrase. Like, I don't know if what they, I could call to mind crazy, like revolution and I don't know, war on the streets or anarchy or something. So expand on that word a little bit and just wrap up with why the issues you're talking about are important to people who maybe don't feel personally connected to the work that you view as so important.
Liberation is being free, right? It's freedom. It's being free from anything that is oppressing you. Right now, the criminal justice system is an institution that has been designed to oppress people of color, people that are marginalized, and not only people who are of color or marginalized, but now we're talking about people who are of the LGBTQ community.
Yes.
So we're talking about liberation. If you put the lens of an LGBTQ community onto mass liberation, it will just make you sick. People that need to be liberated are coming in all different sizes, shapes, colors. So we are liberating people from the criminal justice system. First of all, it happens at the local level, and it's not just ending mass incarceration, but it's also bringing in everybody who is marginalized and being oppressed in some type of a way. So that's what we're trying, and we're going to expand into that as well.
Okay. How can everybody get in contact with you, learn more about what your organization is doing?
I'm very big on Facebook, because go to my Facebook page, and it's Qiana Johnson. That's on Facebook. You can go to Life After Release like page. You can go to, or you can just call me. Like, really, my phone is open. It's an open phone. My number is 240-845-4007. Like, this is real. If you need to text me or call me, feel free to do so.
That's amazing.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming in, and I appreciate I was surprised by the breadth of topics you were aware of, because you also had issues of immigration up on
Yes.
your organizing chart
Yep.
as well with LGBTQ. So this is
Liberation.
a lot bigger. Yeah, this is
Liberation.
a lot bigger than what some people might take it for. So we appreciate all the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming through. You were so insightful.
Thank you.
Of course, I learned a lot, and I'm impressed, but also just shocked at the amount of work that you put in and how, I don't know, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank
Cool.
you both.
So I'll make sure to include that information on in an Instagram post. coming
I've
out later
already
this
followed
afternoon.
you and liked
So-
all of your things. That's what I was literally
you.
just doing, and I'm going to promote it because this is work that people need to be aware of. People need to know,
Absolutely.
and you're out here putting in all the footwork. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we're in early voting season right now.
Yes,
So this is
yes.
what it's all about. Vote for these people that you want to do the things you want them to do, because when you don't vote, the people doing stuff you don't like, what happened? They got voted for.
Yep.
Aha, so we've got to be in there. So
if you
Qiana
need
Johnson.
a ride to the voting polls here in Prince George's County, please give me a call.
You are
If you
just
need
too
help with your
generous.
ballot, if
You
you need
are
help with
too
your ballot,
generous.
then you let me know.
She's doing all the work for us, folks. All right, hit her up. Qiana Johnson, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Follow us on social media. We're both on IG. I'm at Steve Discourse. Jay Callie is It's Jay Callie, ITSJAYCALLI. And of course, I got to send a big shout out to my man Clifford Cartel, who composed all the original theme music. And of course, wherever you're listening to this, we really appreciate all the likes, all the comments. Let us know how you feel. Give us some feedback, and share. Share it with your family. Share it with your friends. Hell, share it with your enemies. Honestly, we want more ears. We want more feedback. We want to know what you guys are doing, what we can do to serve you better. And we appreciate the love and support. Thank you.